Hey guys, tonight we're slipping between the sheets of history. And no, that's not just a weird metaphor. The fire's low, the room smells faintly of smoke and questionable hygiene, and there's already someone in the bed. You step closer. You don't ask who they are. That would be rude. In Elizabethan England, sharing a bed with strangers was totally normal. Romantic? Not exactly. Hilarious and slightly horrifying? Absolutely. Wool itches where wool should never itch. Stranger breath fogs the air. Toes make unauthorized contact under suspiciously damp blankets. There were rules, but after dark, it was mostly just chaotic snuggling and passive-aggressive blanket theft. Privacy? Never met her. Comfort? Optional. Personal space? A mythical concept lost to time. And you? You're in it now. Just pray the person next to you doesn't snore, steal your pillow, or confess their sins mid-sleep. If weird, warm, slightly unhinged history helps you unwind, go ahead, like, subscribe, and become one of the many cozy ghosts haunting this bedtime channel. And hey, drop your local time and where you're listening from in the comments. Someone out there might be falling asleep to this nonsense right next to you, in spirit, or in foot-to-foot combat under a medieval blanket. The mattress is wheezing, someone's foot isn't yours, and history just said, mind if I squeeze in. You're standing at the edge of a bed that isn't yours. You weren't invited exactly, but you also weren't told no. The rushes on the floor smell faintly of mold and mead, and in the straw mattress ahead, someone shifts beneath the covers. You see the rise of a shoulder, the curve of a hip, a murmur into the dark. Time to climb in. The mattress, or tick, crackles as your weight joins theirs. It's filled with straw, some of it stiff and poking through the linen like tiny needles. You try not to move too much, but it's hard not to, especially when you're trying to avoid brushing thighs or accidentally spooning someone's spouse. You lie on your side, or at least you try to. There isn't much room for sides here. 3 people in one bed, and none of them family. Or maybe they are. Cousins, distant friends, maybe even someone with a crush you definitely don't want to encourage. But now your elbows are touching, and it's too late. This isn't weird. Not in the 1500s. Beds were precious, made by hand, passed down like treasure. They were carved, stitched, and assembled with enough care that a good one might outlive the person who first slept in it. Some were so valuable, they were specifically named in wills. To my dear niece Anne, I leave the best bed, with all its trimmings and the thickest blanket, for winter's chill. But no matter how thick the blanket, the bed was rarely yours alone. A shared bed was economy, tradition, and intimacy, all tangled into one. Friends shared beds. Travelers shared beds. Servants, guests, lovers, enemies. Even monarchs occasionally offered their beds to visitors, not for anything improper, of course, but as a kind of honor, a symbol of trust, or, depending on the situation, a subtle power move. Historians still argue whether this practice was entirely platonic. Some say it was about survival and proximity. Others, they've read the letters, the diaries, the poems slipped under mattresses. They're not so sure. You exhale. Slowly. You don't want to wake the others, but you can feel it. That tiny electricity when skin brushes skin. The warmth of someone breathing behind your ear. The slight pressure of an accidental knee against your thigh. It's not passion, but it is contact. And in a world that's cold more often than not, contact can mean everything. You shift, careful not to disturb the balance. The blanket pulls tight across your shoulders. Wool. Rough and familiar. You imagine how many bodies have laid beneath it, how many secrets have soaked into its fibers, how many muffled laughs, how many arguments ended with backs turned and arms folded. You think of the quote from an old innkeeper's log: 3 to a bed, none to complain, and all to rise warm. A little cynical, but mostly true. There's an etiquette to this closeness. Unspoken, but universally understood. No turning toward the center without a reason. No sudden movements. No wandering hands. Feet go to the edge. Arms stay folded or curled in. If you're cold, you suffer quietly. Of course, not everyone follows the code. There's the story of a young midwife who shared a bed with a parish clerk one rainy spring in Norfolk. According to her very detailed journal, they didn't speak a word. But by morning, she had a new opinion of the Church of England. Whether that meant faith or something else entirely, historians still debate. You glance to your left. A shadowy shape lies curled, long hair spread over the pillow like silk. To your right, a heavier body exhales in a grunt and rolls slightly. You hold your breath until the bed settles. And this is where you'll stay till dawn. One straw tick, 2 strangers. And the blanket, you're all pretending, is larger than it is. No room for modesty. No room for pride. Just shared heat and silence stretching on like an ocean. A fun fringe tidbit? Some beds had ropes instead of slats. You'd lie on cords, tightened with a key, a literal sleep-tight situation. If you're lucky, tonight's bed isn't sagging in the middle. If you're unlucky, all of you roll together like soup ingredients in a pot. And yes, sometimes things happened. You know that. Everyone knew that. But even when they didn't, the bed was never just for sleep. It was a place where secrets breathed, where friendships deepened, or ended, in the stillness of the dark. The wind sighs outside the shuttered window, a drip in the corner. A mouse rustles in the thatch. And in this moment, tight, shared, intimate, you're not just in a bed. You're inside a living piece of history. A moment that's played out 1,000,000 times. In castles, in cottages, in crowded roadside inns. 3 bodies tangled together by necessity, by culture, by the very shape of the world. You close your eyes, let the warmth spread, let the quiet pull you under. You're here now. You're part of the night. The blanket stays in place tonight, mostly. But it's a dance, isn't it? You shift to your right, and someone else adjusts to the left. A silent tug of war in slow motion, all in the dark. No one speaks. No one dares to. But every movement is a negotiation, a quiet request, answered by rustling straw and sighs. Clothes stay on. That's the rule. Officially. But what counts as clothes? In Elizabethan England, you sleep in your shift, or your chemise, or your shirt. If you're wealthy, it's linen, and it smells faintly of rosewater and starch. If you're not, it smells like smoke, sweat, and the fire you sat next to all day. Underclothes, layers. This was your sleepwear. Pajamas were not a thing. Nightgowns were rare. And nakedness, well, that depended on how many were in the bed and how close you were willing to get. See, the line between intimacy and utility was blurry. You're trying to stay warm. Of course you are, but you're also acutely aware of how thin this linen shift is, how easily it rides up when you turn over, how a breath might flutter the fabric against bare skin. Someone next to you inhales sharply, then lets the air go in a slow hush. It brushes your neck, and suddenly, everything is very awake. This is what passed for normal. 3 people under one blanket, breathing the same air, dreaming different dreams, hoping they don't wake up in a compromising position, or worse, get caught in one. Because yes, there were rules, written and unwritten. Beds weren't just beds, they were boundaries. You knew what was acceptable. You tried to stick to it. But in the dark, in the warmth, in the slow unraveling of nighttime tension, Boundaries sometimes became suggestions. And then there were the accidents, the oops touches, the rolls too close, the moment you half wake and realize your leg has been lying across someone else's for far too long. A gentleman might apologize. A lady might pretend to be asleep. A farmer might simply mutter, "Move," and go right back to snoring. Responses varied. The tension, however, did not. Historians still argue whether people just got used to this, or if it constantly tiptoed on the edge of scandal. Did Elizabethan bedmates really maintain strict propriety? Or did they simply become very good at pretending they did? The answer probably depends on who's telling the story and who was in the bed. Now you might think, surely there was some privacy, some curtain, maybe, or a little separation. Sometimes, if you were wealthy, your bed had heavy velvet or woolen drapes, four-poster canopies that could be drawn at night to hold in warmth and keep out prying eyes. But if you were sleeping 3 to a mattress, that wasn't for privacy. It was for insulation. Even then, people were rarely alone. Servants might be stationed behind those curtains, waiting in case you needed help. Children might curl at the foot, dogs beside them. Beds weren't sacred. They were functional. Shared. Lived in. A fringe tidbit for you? Some noble households had bed inventories, detailed notes of who slept where, with whom, and how often. This wasn't about scandal. It was about logistics. Who was where? And did they have the proper coverings? Did the right heirloom blanket get used? Did Cousin Henry sneak off to avoid his assigned spot again? These records tell us more than most journals. They tell us who wanted to be near whom, and who quietly kept moving their sleeping slot every week. You shift again, carefully. Your shift clings to you a little now, your body warm, your limbs entangled in shared heat and scratchy linen. There's a moment where the edge of the blanket slips, and someone's hand moves, slow, unsure, before retreating like a guilty thought. No one says anything. Of course they don't. In this era, virtue is currency, especially for women. A wandering hand could mean ruin, or a wedding, depending on the status of the person it belonged to. But in these hours between sleep and morning, everyone's just human, cold, tired, vulnerable, and sometimes that humanity wins out. Now, here's your reality check. Even with all this whispered tension, most nights were far more uncomfortable than romantic. You were exhausted from work, chilled from drafty walls, and maybe suffering from lice or aching joints. The mood? Less steamy and more, "Please don't drool on me." Still, that low thrum of something lived in the corners. The bed was a stage, and most people played their part. Chaste, respectable, respectfully chaste. But now and then, someone went off script. There's the old village tale of the baker's daughter who switched beds with her sister just to avoid a particularly amorous farmhand, only to end up lying next to his younger brother, who snored and talked in his sleep about sheep. Romance? Not quite. But proximity? Oh yes. You lie there now, still listening. One body shifts, another breathes deeply. Somewhere beyond the shutters, a rooster crows far too early. You're not sure if it's dawn or just a confused bird. The blanket's edge has found its way between your knees. The mattress sags slightly toward the middle, drawing all three of you in like a human whirlpool. It's both awkward and strangely comforting. This forced closeness, this constant reminder that you are not, have never been, alone. You feel the soft rise and fall of someone else's ribs behind you. The faintest pressure against your back, not quite contact, but close enough to imagine it is. You wonder if they're asleep, or if they're also lying still, listening, trying to figure out which part of them is allowed to move. Your eyes close, and for a moment, you forget the rules. You just breathe. With them, in rhythm, in warmth. Because in this time, in this world, sometimes the only way to survive the night is to share it. The fire's gone out completely now. All that remains is the scent of charred ash, barely aglow behind the grate. The room is still enough that you can hear the soft sound of someone swallowing in the dark. It's not romantic exactly, but in this moment, surrounded by the hush of breath and the heavy press of warmth, you realize something important about Elizabethan nights. The bed isn't just where you sleep, it's where everything happens. You think of beds as private, as your space. But here, in the 16th century, a bed is a public forum. It's not just somewhere to close your eyes. It's where alliances are formed, deals whispered, gossip spilled, and sometimes even revenge carefully plotted under the pretense of dreams. You're lying on your side, knees tucked, one arm pressed under your head. Next to you, your bedmate murmurs something. Half asleep, half aware. It sounds like a name. You pretend not to hear. You always pretend not to hear. Because beds are social networks. In households without drawing rooms or parlors, this is where people connect. You share more than just the mattress. You share your stories, your fears, your secrets. There's something about the dark that makes people confess things they'd never say in daylight. And when the room is full of breath and heat and half sleep, words become soft currency. You trade them without thinking. Remember, there's no Netflix, no smartphones, no privacy, no place to disappear into except each other. And so the bed becomes a meeting place. A small stage where plays of love, politics, petty jealousy, and accidental confessions unfold every single night. Historians still argue whether this bed as forum dynamic was more common among the poor, who had little choice, or the wealthy, who used it as a subtle way to maintain control. Maybe both, maybe neither. But one thing's clear, if you're lying down next to someone night after night, eventually you talk. Sometimes you whisper names you shouldn't. Sometimes you tell stories about ghosts in the churchyard. Sometimes you ask the person next to you if they're really who they say they are. And if you're clever, you listen. There's a reason nobles and merchants liked to offer their beds to guests. Not just because it was warm or generous, but because the bed was where people let their guard down. It was where you could catch someone saying something they shouldn't. Softly, sleepily, unfiltered. There's a letter now sitting in an archive from a steward to his master, explaining that he overheard in the second hour past midnight one Master Levington confess in bed that he'd sold grain meant for the kitchens. The man didn't mean to reveal it, but that's what the bed does. It makes you unguarded. You're still lying there now. You can feel the shift in weight as someone beside you turns toward you, their breath suddenly warm on the side of your cheek. It's not an advance. It's just space running out. But still, you don't move. Not yet. You listen. You wonder what they're dreaming of. You wonder if they're awake, wondering the same thing. The politics of the bed were everywhere. Families plotted inheritance here. Servants traded secrets overheard from noble mouths. Women warned each other about suitors. Men bragged softly about court visits. The shared bed was a vault, but one without a lock. And not all beds were created equal. Among the upper class, there were best beds and guest beds. It was a great honor to be offered the latter. But sometimes, just sometimes, it came with hidden meaning. A fringe detail for you. Sir Thomas Egerton, a respected statesman, was known to invite young legal apprentices to share his bed. He swore it was simply to foster closeness, a gesture of hospitality and mentorship. Historians still raise their eyebrows. Because in the soft dark, words are gentle, but intentions, they drift. You lie there, your eyes still closed, your thoughts wandering now, like fingers across the edge of a well-worn sheet. What did people really say at night when the world was asleep? Did enemies become allies? Did rivals share secrets? Did lovers pretend to be strangers until the lights went out? You think about how different that is from now, or maybe not so different at all. Beds are still where you drop your guard, where conversations last longer than they should, where laughter sneaks in after midnight, where you learn things you never meant to share. And it wasn't all whispers and scandal. Sometimes it was comfort, companionship. People didn't just share beds to be warm. They did it to feel known, to not be alone. You open your eyes, just barely. The shape beside you is still now. Silent. Another lump under the blanket. You could reach out and touch their shoulder. You could speak. You could ask a question you've been holding in your chest since you crawled into this tick-filled mattress hours ago. But you don't. Because maybe tomorrow they'll pretend nothing was said. Maybe they were dreaming. Or maybe you were. Still, the words are there. In the space between breath and blanket. In the sighs and turns. In the stillness that only comes when two people are quiet for long enough that silence becomes shared. And when morning comes, no one will talk about it. No one will say what was heard, what was said, what was almost said. You'll rise, stretch, rub your eyes, mumble a greeting, step over someone's boots, and leave the secrets in the sheets, because that's what beds were for. Not just for sleeping, but for knowing more than you were ever meant to know. You shift again, and the tick groans beneath you, stuffed with straw that pokes at your thighs like little whispers of discomfort. One pokes directly into your ribs. You wiggle it loose quietly. But the truth is, this bed was never designed for elegance. It was made for necessity. And what you're lying on now? Well, it's basically a crunchy bag of field scraps wrapped in linen. That's right, straw ticks. Welcome to the real luxury of Elizabethan bedding. Forget feather beds unless you're filthy rich. Down-filled mattresses were rare, prized, and often smelled faintly of goose forever. You get the humble tick, a canvas sack filled with straw, hay, reeds, or even old rags, depending on what's around. It rustles every time you breathe, and there's a 50-50 chance something inside is still alive. Tonight's tick, probably straw, dry, crinkly, smelling faintly of barn. You shift again and something sharp jabs your lower back. A twig maybe, or a piece of thistle someone didn't bother to pull. Your bedmate grunts in his sleep. You hope it was in solidarity. Now, let's talk about the smell, because you've got a mixture happening. Body odor, damp wool, maybe a splash of ale breath from your neighbor's mouth. Add to that the mattress aroma, a combination of dust, mildew, and something vaguely herbal. Maybe last year's lavender sachet, long since decayed into ghost scent. If you're lucky, the tick was recently turned, beaten with a stick, and left outside for a bit of sun. But that's a once-a-year chore in most households. So odds are, this thing hasn't seen daylight since Henry VIII, who had knees. Historians still argue whether people truly noticed the discomfort of their beds. Some say they were too tired to care. Others believe that's why first and second sleep existed, because no one could stay asleep for 8 straight hours when their mattress kept snapping like a roast chicken. There's something almost comical about the whole arrangement. A room full of people, 3 or 4 to a bed. Everyone pretending the tick isn't crumbling beneath them like an expired granola bar. You wonder how they managed. And then you feel someone's elbow press lightly against your spine. They're trying to find space. Again, so are you. Because no matter how uncomfortable, this is where you are. There's no couch, no second bedroom, no hammock. Beds were scarce and valuable. In many homes, there was only one. That's why everyone squeezed in, and why even noble homes rotated bodies like dinner seating. A fringe tidbit? Some families would rent out bed space. Imagine that. Not just an inn, but a literal spot in the family bed. Strangers curled up between brothers and cousins, sometimes warm, sometimes awkward, sometimes too quiet to be innocent. You think back to the tick, how it's tied to the wooden frame with rope? If there even is a frame. Poorer homes just laid it on the floor. Better ones elevated it with slats or a lattice of ropes that had to be tightened regularly. That's where the phrase "sleep tight" comes from. Not sweet dreams, just ropes pulled taut enough that your mattress didn't sag like soup in a sock. Tonight's ropes creak a little with every movement. Not loud, but enough to remind you you're not alone. The tick sinks in the middle, gently tugging all three of you toward the dip. You try to stay on your side. Really you do. But eventually, gravity wins. You sigh, barely. The air is thick. You think you smell cheese, or feet, or both. Someone's snoring now softly. Rhythmic, predictable. You match your breath to it. It helps, a little. Beds were rarely cleaned the way we think of it now. Linens, yes. Washed in lye or boiled water, though not often. But the ticks themselves? Rarely emptied. Some were reused for decades. The straw inside rotting slowly, compressed over time until it resembled damp cardboard. You try not to think about that. Instead, you focus on the faint sensation of heat against your back. Someone's turned toward you. You don't move away. There's comfort in the shared warmth, even if it's imperfect, even if it comes with the occasional stray toe or the sensation of hair brushing your arm. Remember that you're wearing a full set of underclothes, probably a shift or shirt, possibly even stays or hose if it's cold. No one sleeps naked unless they're reckless, wealthy, or very recently wed. But even with layers, the intimacy is real. Every accidental graze feels amplified. Every shared exhale, personal. You wonder if they dreamed better dreams in these beds, or stranger ones, or just shorter ones, interrupted constantly by creaks and whispers and someone kneading the pot in the corner. That's another thing. If you had to go in the night, you didn't wander off to a bathroom. You used the chamber pot. Quietly, hopefully, maybe under the bed, maybe just outside the door. But if there are 3 people in the bed, you have to climb over someone to get there. It's fine. No one pretends to notice. Just another night in a house, or an inn, where sleep is a shared sport, and comfort is measured not by softness, but by how many times you didn't get elbowed. Beds were never about comfort. Not really. They were about endurance, about shared survival, and about knowing that tomorrow you'd wake up sore, but still breathing. Which is more than you can say for the mouse you just heard under the tick. You let out a small breath, almost a laugh. Elizabethan beds were not luxurious, but they were honest. No fluff, no memory foam, no false promises, just wood, rope, straw, cloth, and bodies. Human. Imperfect. Close. And even in all that rustling, scratching, musty warmth, maybe there's something strangely soothing. You drift finally, not because it's comfortable, but because you have no choice. And maybe that's the secret to sleep. Someone's foot touches yours, just lightly. The barest graze under the blanket. It's not deliberate. Or maybe it is. You don't ask. You don't move. You just lie there, staring at the blackness above, feeling the tick beneath you crunch a little with every breath. You're not sleeping. Not really. But you're not sleeping either. It's a strange in-between. And it only gets stranger when you remember. This is how they did it. Every night. Warmth was everything. And modesty? Well, that was negotiable. Because the number one reason people shared beds in Elizabethan England? Heat. And not the passionate kind. though there was plenty of that in the shadows. No, we're talking body heat. Literal survival. Winters were brutal, fires burned low, and homes leaked cold like sieves. There was no central heating, no cozy space heater humming in the corner. Just layers of scratchy wool, a low fire, and the warmest insulation of all, each other. So you shared. Even if you didn't want to, even if the person next to you breathed through their mouth and whispered nonsense in their sleep, even if they occasionally twitched or turned too fast and knocked the wind out of your lungs, you still shared. Because freezing alone in a corner wasn't romantic, it was deadly. And in that way, every shared bed was a compromise of space, of pride, of comfort, sometimes of reputation. There was a dance to it, a sleepy shuffle of limbs and boundaries. You learned to sleep with your knees pulled in. You kept your arms to yourself. You arranged your body like furniture, trying not to intrude, but always intruding just a little. Historians still argue whether people liked this closeness or merely endured it. Some argue that familiarity made bonds stronger, that these nights spent breathing in the same shared air fostered a kind of empathy. Others think it just dulled the senses, made you numb to discomfort, to proximity, even to affection. And then there's the issue of breath. You've been avoiding it, but it's time. Because when three people are under the same blanket, especially in winter, eventually, breath becomes its own ecosystem. Hot, damp, slightly sour, and unfortunately, close. You turn your face to the edge of the bed, trying to find a sliver of fresh air. It doesn't help. There's a sock near your face. You don't know whose. You don't ask. A fringe tidbit for you. Some households actually assigned sleeping arrangements based on who was known to have the least offensive breath or the quietest sleep habits. In some communities, bedmates were rotated not for fairness, but for odor control. And yet, despite it all, warmth won. Every time. Think about it. Most homes had only one heated room, the hearth. At night, the fire burned low. The rest of the house froze. Ice crept across the inside of windows. Water left in bowls hardened. Animals were often brought inside to survive the night. And you? You had to make do with whatever heat your body could borrow from someone else. So if someone touched your foot under the blanket, you didn't flinch, not unless it stayed there too long. And if someone curled a little closer in the night, you probably didn't push them away, because this wasn't about comfort. This was about getting through the dark hours with your fingers and toes intact. Still, there were unspoken rules. Always, you faced outward, unless the space was tight, in which case you all faced the same way. No turning, unless absolutely necessary. If your bedmate was of the opposite sex and not your spouse, you kept a pillow between you, or a blanket. Or if you had nothing else, the stiffest part of your own conscience. But sometimes those rules got blurry. Late night is a strange time. People say things they shouldn't. They reach without thinking. And when you're tucked in with someone, especially someone whose breath you've just learned to accept, you might find that intimacy sneaks in through sheer proximity. The scandalous part? Many courtships began in shared beds, not illicit ones, just quiet ones. In the dark, when no one could see the look on your face, when you could say something soft and pretend it was a dream, when hands found hands, not by accident, but by quiet choice. You close your eyes now. Try to imagine what that felt like for them. 100 years before the first novel of romance, before love letters were scented with perfume, before Valentine's cards, there was just this, the quiet breath between two people who couldn't stop shivering. And maybe that's what they fell in love with. Not faces or hair or hands, but the feeling of finally being warm, of being still, of being wanted, or at least not refused. Even in noble houses, the same game played out. Wealth could buy thicker blankets, yes, but not always privacy. Servants slept in chambers, on trundles under the bed, in corners, on pallets, and they saw everything, heard everything. So what passed between bedmates wasn't just private. It was protected, like a secret you could only share under a woolen roof. You shift again. The blanket lifts slightly, cool air rushing in before being trapped once more. Someone beside you murmurs, a name maybe, or a prayer, or just nonsense. You don't answer. You just lie there, your fingers curled, your breath slow, because this isn't just about staying warm anymore. It's about learning how to be close, without losing yourself. The air in the room changes, just slightly. A shift in weight, a hint of movement behind your back. Someone is rising, or trying to, and for a second, your eyes flick open. There's just enough light from the shutter's edge to catch the shape of a figure sitting up. A tousled head, a creaking floorboard, and then quiet. This is normal. Servants sleep everywhere. You don't need to turn your head to know that someone's rolled off the pallet in the corner, or that someone else, maybe the scullery boy or your cousin, or the girl who washes chamber pots, has climbed into the bed you're in, because there's nowhere else to go. And honestly, no one cares. In Elizabethan households, especially among the working class, sleep wasn't private. It wasn't even spatially organized. People slept wherever they could. On benches, in corners, on stools, beneath tables, under beds, next to beds, in the beds of people they served. The hierarchy of the day didn't end at the door of the bedchamber. It just got more intimate. You shift again and feel the tick rise ever so slightly as a smaller body climbs in at the foot. A servant, probably, or one of the children. They move gently, quietly, like someone used to being unnoticed. Servants were ghosts of the house, always present, never acknowledged. They listened, they fetched, they remembered, and at night, they slept near their masters, not for comfort, but for duty. You needed them close in case you wanted water, or wine, or needed someone to run for the apothecary, or to hold a candle while you wrote angry poetry in the dark. Historians still debate whether this close sleeping arrangement was primarily practical or a subtle form of social control. Did it breed loyalty, or was it simply another way to remind everyone of their place? Whatever the case, there they were. You feel the press of a body now near your calves. They're curled up, knees tucked, not even under the blanket, just clinging to the edge, maybe pulling part of it across their shoulder like a secret. You don't say anything. Neither do they, because that's the rule. You pretend you're alone. Even when you're not. Servants sometimes slept in trundles, low wooden frames with mattresses that could be pushed under the bed during the day. At night, they were pulled out and laid parallel to the master's bed like shadows. Other times, they simply dropped onto a woven mat or stuffed sack in the corner, or crawled beneath the table, using a dog for warmth. And then there were the unlucky ones, the ones who had no assigned place at all. They floated, slept where they could, curled up like stray cats in attics, stairwells, entry halls. Some were young, some old. Some so tired they could sleep standing up, or under the bed, or next to your shoes. A fringe tidbit? In some noble households, bed steps weren't just steps to reach a tall mattress. They were hollow, designed to hold a servant, curled up like a doll, just in case they were needed in the middle of the night. You slept while they lay awake, listening. And yes, sometimes servants heard everything: the whispered arguments, the soft laughter, the sound of shifting bodies, and things that weren't meant to be noticed. They were the keepers of secrets, not by choice, but by proximity. There's a story passed down in one household journal about a maid who overheard her mistress weeping every night. For months, she never said a word, just tucked the blankets tighter and left dried lavender on the pillow in silence. You wonder about the servant at the foot of your bed now. Are they sleeping? Are they cold? Are they listening? You'll never know. That's the point. Servants were there for your convenience, but they lived in the margins, and their presence, night after night, became a kind of rhythm. You came to expect the quiet shuffle of feet, the muted cough, the occasional rustle of clothing as someone settled into their space by your bed. And sometimes they became more than just background. It happened. You know it did. Glances exchanged at dusk, a brush of fingers while adjusting a blanket, a moment drawn too long in the candlelight. Not every connection respected the boundary between master and servant, and not every servant was willing or free to choose. Historians still argue whether those stolen nights were romance, manipulation, or simple desperation. You lie very still now, wondering about the stories that lived in rooms like this. What went unspoken? What was endured? What was yearned for and never touched? Because while the bed might have been shared, the power never was. And yet, there were exceptions. There's a record of a maid and a noblewoman who shared a bed not out of duty, but choice. They slept together every night for nearly a decade. Some say it was companionship. Others believe it was something more. The letters they left behind are vague, full of soft language and delicate longing. They never married. They were buried near each other. Whatever they were something. You think about the servant at your feet. You won't ask their name in the morning. You won't look them in the eye. That's how it's done. But tonight, in the dark, you adjust the blanket just slightly, just enough to cover their shoulder. Not to be kind, just practical. That's what you'll tell yourself anyway. And when they breathe a little softer, a little deeper, you close your eyes and join them. Because sleep is no longer a solo act. It's a house-wide ritual, a quiet dance of bodies, duties, silences, and in this bed, even the smallest shift carries weight. It's early now, that soft, uncertain hour just before first light, the kind of hour where dreams haven't fully let go of your thoughts and reality hasn't quite arrived to take their place. You blink in the dark, not to see, but to feel time pass. And as you lie there, you become aware of every single body in the bed. There's one pressed up along your back, legs curled just enough to suggest they gave up on personal space around midnight. One more by your knees, maybe the child or servant from earlier. Their breath shallow, rhythmic, barely stirring the shared blanket. It's a tangle, but a quiet one. Because this is what family sleep looks like in Elizabethan England. You're all packed together like spoons in a drawer. Parents, siblings, cousins, the occasional in-law or uncle visiting from 2 towns over. There are no boundaries. None of the polite silences we pretend exist today. This is close living. This is shared humanity. And in this moment, you're part of it. Family beds weren't special. They were standard. In many homes, there was only one. And if you were lucky, you got to sleep in it. If you weren't, you curled up on the floor or squeezed beside someone else like a forgotten pillow. It didn't matter your age or relationship. If there was space in the bed, someone filled it. A married couple might have their toddler curled between them, the grandmother at the foot, and 2 older children pressed in along the sides like warm bricks. Personal space was a fantasy, but shared warmth? That was the real comfort. You try to imagine your modern life in this bed, sharing a mattress with your siblings, your mother, your snoring cousin, that one aunt who breathes through her mouth and smells like pickled beets. And yet, somehow it worked. Historians still argue whether the lack of privacy in Elizabethan beds made people closer or simply trained them to endure each other in silence. Was it bonding or forced tolerance? There's no real answer, just stories. And sometimes those stories are all you need. There's a record from a Yorkshire village where 4 generations of women shared a bed in winter. They slept top to tail, meaning heads at one end, feet at the other, then reversed in alternating order. It wasn't elegant, but it kept the cold off. You shift again, trying to visualize that. Someone's feet near your face. Your feet brushing someone's hip. You're not sure if that's warmer or worse. And then there's the noise. Oh, the noise. Because when you cram 5 or 6 family members into a single bed, the human body becomes loud. Snoring, wheezing, whispering, giggling. Someone passes wind, then pretends they didn't. Someone scratches at fleas under the blanket. Someone whispers a prayer. Someone grinds their teeth so loudly you're sure it's a demon chewing bones under the mattress. You lie still, breathing shallow, trying to find your own rhythm among all the others. And then someone starts talking in their sleep. It's your cousin, you think, murmuring something about losing the good eggs. Maybe a dream, maybe a memory, maybe a confession. You consider nudging them but don't. Everyone's used to it by now. That's the thing about family beds. There's no mystery left. You know what everyone smells like. You've seen your sister drool. You've felt your brother's cold feet against your shin. You've heard your father groan when his joints ache in the morning. It's all there, raw and honest, piled under wool and linen and a few feet of rough timber roof. But somehow, in all that closeness, there's also comfort. You remember a moment, years ago now, when your mother pulled the blanket higher over you. No words, just the warmth of her hand. Or maybe your grandmother, whispering a story into the dark when no one could sleep. Or your younger sibling curling close during a thunderstorm, too old to admit they were scared, but not old enough to keep away. Those memories are folded into the bed like extra layers. A fringe tidbit. In some rural communities, children weren't weaned until they were practically walking. And even then, they shared a bed with their mother and siblings for years. The bed was more than just a place to sleep. It was a nursery, a confessional, a battlefield, and sometimes a makeshift sick room. Yes, people even died in these beds. Not always dramatically, sometimes just quietly, in the night. A final breath among bodies that didn't notice until morning. Death wasn't a private affair. It often happened with 5 people still asleep around you. And life went on, because it had to. You glance toward the shutter. The light is changing now, just faintly. A softening of shadows. A quiet promise of morning. You wonder who will wake first. Probably your father. He always does. Then your mother, who will begin the ritual of shaking the children, tugging at arms, pushing feet toward the floor. There will be groaning. There will be grumbling. There always is. But for now, everyone's still sleeping. And in that moment, tight as it is, tangled and noisy, and borderline unbearable, you feel something you didn't expect. Peace. Not because it's quiet, but because it's known. The way your brother mumbles, the smell of your cousin's wool socks, the slow creak of the tick as someone shifts in a half-dream. These are the things you've shared 1,000 nights before. And even if you long for space, for silence, for solitude, there's something grounding about being part of this heap of warmth and breath in history. You close your eyes again. Someone stirs beside you, but you don't move. Not yet. There's still time to pretend you're asleep. Still time to be a body in the dark. Still time to belong. Someone's up before you. You hear it. The soft rustle of blankets peeled back, a quiet footfall against the rushes on the floor. You keep your eyes closed. Pretend you're still asleep. Not because you want to, but because waking means shifting, moving, making room. And once someone gets up from a shared bed, the entire balance collapses. That little gap left behind is a cold invitation, a warning, a temptation for the nearest body to roll over and take it. That's how it works. You move, you lose, and in Elizabethan England, where personal space is rarer than soap, you don't give it up easily. Today, though, the person rising wasn't a sibling or a spouse. They were a guest, a visitor, and that means everything. Because in this time, where who you sleep beside says more than who you marry, guest beds are political. You don't get offered one unless you've earned it, or someone wants something, and sometimes both. The person who left the bed just now, probably the merchant from Stratford, the one with the 2 shiny boots and the suspiciously generous laugh. He arrived late last night, greeted your father like an old friend, then whispered something at supper that made your mother's eyes go a little too wide. Now here he is, rising before dawn, trying not to disturb the others, but also making sure he's seen being considerate, because every move in the guest bed is calculated. In noble homes, where rooms are scarce and status matters more than food, where you sleep tells everyone what you're worth. You don't get the best bed unless you're family, or being flattered. You don't get placed next to the host unless they want you close. And if you're given a mattress outside the main room, well, don't expect a second invitation. Historians still argue whether guest bed assignments were rooted in politics or propriety. Were you placed beside the Lord because of trust, or because they needed to keep an eye on you? Did the lady of the house invite you to share her maid's bed because she respected you, or wanted to humiliate you quietly? Beds don't lie, but the people who assign them? Oh, they do. You roll onto your back now, careful not to jostle your other bedmates. The blanket slips a little. Cold rushes in. You hear someone murmur and turn away. You stay still, because you're remembering a story. A fringe tidbit from a Wiltshire manor, where a nobleman offered his guest, an ambitious young poet, a space in his own bed. Not out of affection, not even interest, but as a show of dominance. You may lie where I lie, he said, but only while I let you. The guest accepted, wrote 3 sonnets that winter, never came back. That's how it worked. Beds as favors, beds as tests, beds as the soft battlegrounds of quiet ambition. And of course, sometimes it was about affection, the genuine kind. 2 traveling students huddled together in a rented room above a tavern, sharing secrets in the candlelight. A young widow offering her friend a corner of her mattress for the night and waking to find their hands still touching. Moments that began with shivers and ended with stories, but not always. Sometimes the offer to share a bed came with an unspoken clause, and if you turned it down, that might cost you more than comfort. It could cost you a patron, a marriage proposal, a friendship, or worse, a rumor. A single word slipped during breakfast, something about how cold you were, how formal, how unwilling to connect. Refusing a bed was refusing a bond. And the worst part? You never quite knew if the offer was innocent. That was the dance. The pause before answering, the glance across the hearth, the gentle laugh and the phrase, "It's a tight fit, but we'll make do." Would you? You think about it now lying here. That merchant from Stratford, his boots lined up by the door. The fact that he chose your bed, not the mattress by the fire, not the servant's trundle, yours. Was it strategy or something softer? You'll probably never know, because the rule, as always, is pretend it was nothing. And in the morning, You smile, pass the bread, offer the basin for washing, and say nothing about the way your shoulders touched in the night. Nothing about the moment just before sleep when he asked what you dreamed about. Nothing at all. You sit up now, slowly, feet on the floor. The rushes are cold, damp in places. Someone's already stirring in the corner. The servant from last night, folding a blanket and tucking it under their arm like a secret. The fire is low, the coals barely glowing. You rise, shake your shift straight, stretch your arms, and as you leave the bed behind, you glance back at it. The dent in the tick where he lay, the wrinkle in the sheet where your hip had pressed against his. You smooth it, absently. Not because it's messy, but because it's evidence. And in a house like this, sometimes the most intimate things are the ones you leave unsaid. You pass a tapestry on your way to the basin. It hangs crooked on the stone wall, its threads loose and fraying, but the image it carries is unmistakable. A massive four-poster bed draped in crimson velvet, gold tassels trailing down like spilled candle wax. It's a bed meant to impress, a bed meant to conceal, a bed with a story. Because noble beds, they weren't just beds, they were messages. You step quietly back into the room. The guest has gone. Your siblings are still tangled in their shared sheet, and the fire is only now beginning to wake. You stare at your own sleeping spot, the scratchy tick, the smoothed linen, the lingering impression of where his shoulder brushed yours, and then you glance toward the corner. There it is, the best bed, the one reserved for important guests, the one no one ever talks about, but everyone watches. In Elizabethan England, beds told secrets, not with words, with fabric, with placement, with curtains, especially the curtains. You draw closer to it now, slowly, like it might speak if you listen carefully enough. The thick damask hangs heavily from the canopy, knotted at the corners for now. But at night, they fall like stage curtains around a play no one's allowed to admit they're watching. And you start to understand, noble beds were theaters. Historians still debate how much privacy these curtains truly offered. Some say they were mere decoration, an affectation of wealth. Others believe they were vital, for warmth, for modesty, for secrets whispered between bodies who shouldn't have been so close. But either way, you can't deny the symbolism. To be invited inside these curtains, that meant something. Power, trust, temptation, protection. You imagine it, slipping past the tassels, the air warmer inside, smelling of lavender and skin. The outside world muffled, your heartbeat suddenly louder. Someone already waiting there in the dark, or worse, someone watching from the other side of the drapes unseen, listening to every breath. Because those curtains didn't just keep things in, they also kept the outside world out. In many noble households, the master and mistress would hold court from the bed. Literally, visitors would be brought into the chamber, expected to bow or curtsy at the foot of the mattress. Sometimes there'd be conversation, sometimes gifts, sometimes a request for favor, but only some would be invited closer. And if the curtains were closed, you didn't ask why. A fringe tidbit for you. Queen Elizabeth I famously held bedchamber audiences while partially in bed. It was symbolic, a display of vulnerability paired with ultimate control. She showed softness without yielding power. Clever, subtle, dangerous. You stand now before the noble bed in your house and touch one of the curtain ties. The fabric is stiff, woven with metallic thread. Someone stitched this by hand, spent weeks, maybe months, making sure every detail was perfect. Because this bed is status, and behind its curtains, that's where the real stories lived. There's an old saying, a bed with curtains knows more than a priest. You believe it. People met here in secret. Lovers, yes, but also conspirators. This was where plots began, where betrayals whispered into pillows became revolutions. And sometimes, the bed held more than people. You remember hearing that old story, the one about the nobleman's wife who hid a box beneath the mattress for 10 years. Inside, a tiny collection of letters, some from her husband, some from a man he'd executed. No one knew. Not until she died and the mattress was taken apart. Beds are repositories of breath, of scent, of memory, and of scandal. You shift the curtain now just slightly. Peek behind it. The air changes again. Even in daylight, it feels private in here, like stepping into a confessional. The dust is thick, the sheets untouched. You can imagine someone lying here, staring at the carved canopy above, wondering who might join them, and what that meant. Because unlike the shared beds of servants and siblings, this one is invitation only. And that made it dangerous. You lie back against the tick for a moment, just for a breath, just to feel it. The quiet, the weight, the promise in the shadows. Curtains close easily, but the emotions behind them? Not so much. You think again about that night weeks ago when your mother took ill. How the physician came, eyes heavy with knowledge he wouldn't speak aloud. How he sat beside the bed. And how your father, so proud, so careful, let the curtain fall behind him. That's the only time you ever saw him cry? Because behind those curtains, pride meant nothing. Neither did class. Only the body. Only sleep. Only death. Or love. Or something complicated and quieter, like longing. You rise again, pull the curtain gently shut, leave the bed untouched, because some stories aren't yours to lie in. Not yet. You glance once more at the tapestry in the hall, at the image of the bed so large it could swallow a secret hole. And as you walk away, you know, the most dangerous things in this house don't wear swords or rings. They sleep behind curtains. And sometimes, they don't sleep at all. The sun is higher now, but it doesn't matter, you're still in bed. Or half in it. Your feet dangle off the edge, your back curved into the well-worn dip in the middle of the tick. Someone else is still snoring softly nearby, but you're wide awake, staring at the ceiling, where smoke has stained the beams into soft gray shadows. There's movement in the hall. A door clicks open, then quietly, footsteps, measured, slow, deliberate. You hold your breath, because he is coming, the sleepwatcher. He has no official title, no badge, no uniform, but everyone knows who he is. Every manor has one, every noble house, and in homes with secrets, he's the one who keeps them. He's not here to serve you. He's here to witness. Because someone needs to listen when the doors are closed and the beds are full and the curtains are drawn. Someone needs to report what happens in the dark. You shift beneath the blanket, suddenly aware of everything. Your posture, the curve of your hip, the way the linen has slipped down to expose your collarbone. You tug it higher. Reflex. Fear? Maybe. Because if the sleepwatcher sees it, it means they know. And sometimes, all it takes is a look for a story to be rewritten. Sleepwatchers were servants, usually older, loyal, unremarkable. Sometimes women. Often men. Their job was not to clean or cook or even assist. Their job was to observe, quietly, completely, without judgment, and without mercy. It was a formal position in royal courts. A trusted listener, a keeper of nighttime behaviors. Did the visiting lord sneak into someone else's room? Did the chambermaid slip behind a curtain? Did the heir to the estate mutter treason in his sleep? The sleepwatcher heard it all. Historians still debate how much power these watchers held. Some believe they were passive, little more than furniture. Others argue they were active agents, trusted by monarchs, feared by nobles, paid in secrets more than coin. One documented case? A sleepwatcher in the household of a prominent duke testified under oath that he heard the rustling of skirts and soft laughter at the 12th hour from within the Lord's bedchamber. That testimony led to a duel. And a widow. You wonder what your sleepwatcher has heard. You haven't seen him. Not clearly. But you felt him. That subtle presence in the corner of the room. The pause in the hallway. The way conversations suddenly change when he's nearby, even if no one admits he's there. And here's the secret no one tells you. Sometimes he isn't in the corner. Sometimes he's in the bed. That's right. When space is tight, when inns are full, when winter makes every extra body a blessing, the watcher is invited under the covers, not to sleep, but to listen. A fringe detail? In one traveler's journal, he recalls sharing a bed in a busy coaching inn with 2 others, one of whom remained silent the entire night, never introduced himself, never spoke, just lay still, eyes open, watching the rafters. In the morning, he was gone. The innkeeper said, "Oh, that's just the listener." You shiver, because you remember last week when you said something you shouldn't have, softly, sleepily, about your uncle's debts, about the money missing from the strongbox. You thought no one heard, but the next morning, your father's mood was different. No mention of it, no accusation, just that look, that quiet knowledge. And now you wonder, did the sleepwatcher tell him? Or did he simply not look away when you were supposed to be asleep? You sit up now slowly. Your skin is damp where the linen has clung to it all night. Your hair's flattened on one side. You comb it with your fingers, trying to feel normal. But nothing about this feels normal anymore. Because the bed, you're starting to realize, is not just where you dream. It's where you're seen. And once you've been seen, you can never go back to being invisible. You swing your legs over the edge, touch the floor. The rushes crackle. You glance to the doorway, but no one's there. Still you feel it, that gaze, that awareness. You think about what you've said, what you've done, what you've almost done, and you wonder how much of it now lives in someone else's memory. The watcher doesn't write anything down, not that you see, but the lords remember, and the queens remember. And if they need to know whether someone said rebellion in their sleep or kissed the wrong person after too much wine, well, the watcher remembers too. It's a heavy silence they carry, and it follows you now, even as you step away from the bed, even as you begin to dress, even as you rehearse in your head the stories you will tell about last night, and the ones you'll let fade quietly into the dark. But here's the most dangerous thing. Sometimes the sleepwatcher doesn't say a word. He just looks at you in the morning and waits. And that silence, that's where the real power is. You're not home anymore. The stone walls are replaced with plaster and smoke-stained beams. The bed beneath you isn't your family's. It's smaller, lower, and smells vaguely of cider and goat. There's a candle guttering in the corner, and outside the window, you can hear someone throwing up in the alley. Welcome to student life in Elizabethan England. And more importantly, welcome to the bed. You're a scholar now, or trying to be, trying. Latin by daylight, ale by moonlight, and in between, you sleep. Somewhere. With someone. Possibly several someones. University lodgings weren't private little dorm rooms with fleece blankets and inspirational posters. They were communal spaces crammed with hopeful young men, piles of books, and dreams too big for the ceiling beams. And when the candle went out, you shared a mattress, a blanket, and occasionally someone's elbow in your ribs. You're lying next to 2 fellow students tonight. One of them smells like boiled mutton. The other breathes too fast. The blanket's too short. And the mattress? It's not even straw. Just sacks of cloth on a wooden plank. You try to find a position that doesn't involve touching both of them at once. You fail. There's a reason most portraits of scholars look exhausted. In the university towns, Oxford, Cambridge, and all their little cousins, student beds were chaotic and overcrowded. Inns around campus were jammed with pupils, apprentices, and would-be poets, all squeezed into rooms like books on a shelf. If you were lucky, you got the outer edge. If not, you ended up with two roommates snoring on either side and one asleep underneath the bed because there was nowhere else to go. And modesty? Please, you all saw each other naked in the river baths or in the yard during laundry. After a while, you stopped noticing, or pretending to, but still some things were unspoken. The way a hand might linger too long when passing the blanket. The way someone laughed too quietly at your joke. The way you felt someone shift closer in their sleep and didn't move away. Historians still argue whether these bed shares among young men were purely innocent or not so much. The truth? Probably a bit of both. There are poems, letters, some with lines too careful to be accidental, others with language so intimate it borders on confession. There's even a recorded case in 1583 where two Cambridge students were caught lying cheek by cheek in a rented bed. When questioned, they claimed it was for warmth and not wickedness. The university fined them and let them return to their studies. You sigh now, pressing your arm under your head. The tick is uneven. The ceiling above you has a crack shaped like a dagger. Someone on your left coughs, once, twice, then groans and rolls onto his side. The blanket goes with him. You try to tug it back, gently. He resists in his sleep. This, you think, is probably why philosophers are always grumpy. And yet, there's something kind of charming about it. You're all hungry, half broke and barely passing your rhetoric lessons. But you share the bed like brothers. You argue about Greek until midnight, then curl up like puppies and fall asleep mid-sentence. You remember last week when rain flooded the hallway and 6 of you packed into one room. One bed, one bench, and a couple of blankets shared between a pile of damp scholars who dried themselves with Latin declensions and sarcasm. And the next morning, you all stumbled out, eyes puffy, quoting Seneca and swearing to never sleep together again. You did, of course, the very next night. A fringe tidbit. A pamphlet from 1601 describes a student lodging house with rotating beds. You bought a ticket for your sleep slot, 2 hours at a time. When the bell rang, you were expected to get up and make room for the next student. No exceptions, the owner wrote, unless ye are vomiting or dead. You're grateful tonight isn't one of those nights. You're in the full-time bed, for now. But there's always someone knocking at the door, asking if they can just rest their feet or lie down just till the candle burns out. And once they're in, they never leave. You've gotten good at maneuvering. Twisting sideways, sleeping half on, half off, using your satchel as a pillow to avoid lice. You reach out now blindly and find the edge of the blanket again. You pull. This time, your roommate lets go. The warmth returns. You sigh. It's not home. It's not even comfortable. But it's yours. For the night. And as you drift off, listening to someone mutter the first line of Cicero in their sleep, you realize you're not just sharing a bed. You're sharing a season of life. One that smells like sweat, ink, and ambition. And even if your back aches, and your dreams are interrupted by snoring, and someone reciting bad poetry, you'll miss it one day. Maybe. You're awake again, but not because the bed is uncomfortable. Not this time. Not because someone elbowed you or took all the blanket or breathed in your face like a foghorn. No, this time it's time itself that's done it. Because in Elizabethan England, You don't sleep once. You sleep twice. It's called segmented sleep, and it's your body's natural rhythm. Something most people have forgotten now, but back then it was common knowledge. There was first sleep and second sleep, and the strange magical space in between. Right now you're in that space. The room is quiet, but not dead. The kind of quiet where thoughts start to whisper, where shadows seem softer, where breath is slower. This is the hour of strange conversations and accidental honesty. You're lying there, half awake, half dreaming, not quite ready to move. You can hear someone in the bed shift slightly. Another breathes heavily through their nose, but nobody speaks, yet. Back then, this gap between sleeps was known and expected. People would wake for an hour or two. They'd sit up, tend the fire, pray, write, think, talk. Some even visited neighbors, yes, at 2 in the morning. Others used it for more intimate moments, or more often, just stared at the ceiling and tried to remember their dreams. You rolled to your side. The straw tick sighs under your weight. Someone else is awake. You can tell by their breath. It's just a little too deliberate, a little too controlled. Neither of you says anything. Not yet. Historians still debate the origins of segmented sleep. Was it shaped by artificial light or lack thereof? Was it a practical adaptation to short winter days? Or just something our bodies did naturally before the modern world smothered our circadian rhythm under electric bulbs and 9-to-5 jobs? What they do agree on is this. People expected to wake up in the middle of the night. It wasn't strange. It was human. And in those soft hours, everything changed. The expectations relaxed. The masks slipped. You weren't fully awake, but you weren't dreaming either. Just somewhere in between. A place where you might tell someone a secret and not even remember it by morning. You feel your breath match your bedmate's. In, out. A small flutter of warmth under the blanket where your feet meet. You wonder if they're awake. You wonder if they're wondering the same about you. This time, this quiet time, was often filled with quiet rituals. Some people prayed, long whispering prayers with eyes half closed and knees barely lifted off the straw. Others read, or wrote letters, or simply sat by the fire and stared into the embers. There's a note in one 1598 diary from a woman in Norwich who describes the blessed hour between sleeps, when my husband sleeps sound, and I may think freely of my own heart. She says it's when she feels most herself. You can understand that now, because there's a strange clarity in this hour, a softness to thought. You feel untethered, less burdened by rules, less watched. You close your eyes again, not to sleep, just to feel. A fringe tidbit? There are mentions of midnight snacks in Elizabethan households. Not full meals, just small things. A bit of bread, warm ale, maybe fruit if it was the right season. Servants were known to slip downstairs to the kitchens to toast a bit of cheese or sip cider by the hearth. It was seen as entirely normal. And some of those midnight wanderings? Well, they weren't always solitary. There's a well-documented case from 1604 of two maids caught in the pantry together, long after their masters had gone to bed. When questioned, they claimed they had merely woken from first sleep and found each other in one of apples. Sure, that's exactly what they were in one of. You smile just slightly beneath the blanket. There's power in this pause. It's the time where choices are made, where thoughts drift places they shouldn't, where hands sometimes move without permission, or without being stopped. It's quiet, but not safe. Gentle, but not innocent. You know that if you turned just slightly, the person beside you might do the same. You don't, but you know it's possible. And you know that tomorrow, you'll both pretend this moment never existed. that you never considered it, that nothing ever stirred beneath the covers but dreams. You roll onto your back again, count the beams overhead. 1, 2, 3. The silence stretches, not awkward, just suspended, like a breath that hasn't been exhaled. And slowly, the second sleep begins to pull at your limbs again. No signal, no command, just a heaviness in your bones, a slow thickening of your breath. The other body beside you shifts one last time, settles. You wonder what they were thinking. You wonder if you'll remember any of this in the morning. Probably not. That's the magic of this hour. The way it disappears, like a dream with its eyes open. You wake to the scent of something unfamiliar. Sour, earthy, slightly greasy. Not human. Not quite animal either. For a moment you think you're dreaming. Then you open your eyes and it hits you. Feathers, a faint honk, a rustling sound at the foot of the bed. There's a goose in the bed. You blink slowly. Of all the things you expected in this cramped, noisy tavern room, stale bread, maybe a mouse or two, the snoring of strangers, the last thing you thought you'd wake up next to is a plump, slightly judgmental goose tucked into the blanket like a silent, angry guest. Welcome to bed sharing in Elizabethan inns. It's exactly as glamorous as it sounds. You're on the road tonight, traveling, or stranded. Either way, you've ended up in a roadside tavern somewhere between towns, and the place is packed. You'd hoped for a bed to yourself, or at least a clean corner. What you got was a sagging tick shared with two damp travelers and their foul companion. You exhale slowly, trying not to wake anyone. One of your bedmates, a man who smells strongly of turnips and bad ale, is sprawled on his back, mouth wide open. The other, a smaller figure who may or may not be snoring into your shoulder, has claimed the blanket in a vice grip. And the goose is just there, watching, daring you to make eye contact. Taverns were chaotic places, always full, always loud, and always operating on one guiding principle. Space was a commodity, not a right. Beds were rented by the body, not the room. You want to lie down? That'll cost you. You want to lie down alone? Well, now you're just being greedy. Historians still debate whether these arrangements were universally accepted or just tolerated out of necessity. Some say people expected the discomfort. Others say they grumbled loudly into their ale and straw and the feathers of passing livestock. Because yes, animals often came too. The idea of stabling a goose or hen outside in the cold? Laughable. That goose is valuable. It lays eggs. It may one day be dinner. It's worth more than your dignity. And so it sleeps with you, tucked in like an angry little furnace with a beak. And if you think this is a one-off experience, think again. A fringe tidbit: a 1587 inn ledger from Leicester includes notes about two fowlkeepers who routinely shared beds with their charges. One entry reads, "One traveler with cockerel laid together. No incident." Another, "Goose took part of coverlet. Man complained not." Of course he didn't. The goose always wins. You shift gently now, trying to reclaim a sliver of blanket. Your leg brushes against someone else's. Too warm, too hairy, not yours. You freeze. They don't stir. And just when you think things can't get weirder, someone in the next bed starts singing in their sleep. It's muffled, tuneless, but unmistakably a song. You close your eyes, because this, somehow, is normal. Taverns were the great equalizers. Rich and poor alike passed through them, bound by ale, bad lighting, and the bed lottery. You might sleep beside a traveling monk, a thief, or the daughter of a wealthy wool merchant on the run from an arranged marriage. You might wake up to find your purse lighter, or heavier, or missing entirely. You might overhear plans for a robbery, or a wedding, or a duel. Beds here were less about rest and more about endurance. And there were rules. Unspoken, but solid. Don't speak unless necessary. Don't ask questions. Don't move too much. Don't complain about the animals. You remember the last tavern you stayed in. A fire blazing too hot, a man coughing his lungs into the shared chamber pot, and a girl in the corner gently brushing her hair, while 5 others tried to sleep. No one complained. They just adjusted. Because you didn't come here for comfort. You came here for shelter. And maybe a story. There's a tale, passed around in whispers, about a nobleman who disguised himself as a peasant to spy on local gossip. He ended up sleeping in an inn bed with 3 strangers, one of whom was an escaped convict. In the morning, the nobleman paid for everyone's breakfast and left without saying a word. When he was knighted months later, the convict recognized him, didn't say a word either. The bed was sacred, not because it was private, but because it was shared. You shift again, careful not to disturb the goose. It honks once softly, then settles its beak against the pillow like it owns the place. Maybe it does. Your eyes drift to the low ceiling. The candles burned out. Someone outside is laughing. Someone inside is muttering. Someone 2 beds over is having a very vivid dream. And you're just one more body in the pile, one more soul passing through the warm, loud heart of the road. You'll leave tomorrow. Your blanket will smell like someone else. Your back will ache. And your dreams may forever include a slightly damp goose watching you breathe. But tonight, you're not cold. And that, in this world, is enough. You're not sure what time it is, but you know you're awake, and you know something is wrong. It starts with a sound, not loud, not sharp, just wrong. Like fabric brushing too softly, like someone whispering your name from behind a wall. You open your eyes slowly. The room hasn't changed. The fire is nearly out. The others in the bed are still, chests rising and falling in rhythm. But your skin prickles. Something's here. In Elizabethan England, sleep isn't just sleep. It's a threshold. A place where dreams and the real world blur. Where spirits visit. Where warnings are whispered, and demons sometimes press their weight on your chest in the middle of the night. They call it the nightmare. Not a bad dream. Not exactly. It's more physical, more ancient, and it doesn't matter if you're rational. Doesn't matter if you think you're too clever for stories. When it comes for you, it comes. You lie still, very still. Someone once told you not to move when it happens, not to speak. Just wait. Because if it's a ghost, it will pass. And if it's something else, you don't want to wake it. Sleep in Elizabethan England is filled with superstition. The night is not a neutral thing. It's thick with meaning. A bad dream isn't just unsettling. It could be a message, or a curse, or a sign you're being watched by something that doesn't sleep. Historians still argue whether the fear of dreams was more spiritual or medical. The church taught that nighttime visions were trials of the soul, temptations sometimes, tests. But physicians offered another answer. Humors out of balance, an excess of black bile, or the wrong foods before bed. The result was the same. You dreamed, and you feared. People recorded these dreams. Diaries, letters, prayer books scribbled with notes. A woman in 1573 wrote that she dreamed her mother's ghost stood at the foot of her bed and called her name 3 times. The next day, she received news her cousin had died. Coincidence? Maybe. But try telling that to someone sleeping in a creaky house with a leaky roof and no candle left. You roll slightly, eyes scanning the room. It's too dark to see details, but the outline of the furniture looks different somehow. Wrong. A shadow where there shouldn't be. A shape that wasn't there when you lay down. You close your eyes again. Try to breathe slowly. Try to remember what your grandmother told you about putting a Bible under the pillow, about making the sign of the cross before bed, about not falling asleep with your feet pointed toward the door. You forgot to do that last one. Your feet are pointed right at the door. A fringe tidbit? Many Elizabethans believed spirits entered through doorways and fireplaces. Beds were often turned to face away from the threshold. Some even nailed bits of iron or salt pouches to the bedposts to ward off the night. And more than a few hung rosemary in the rafters above to keep witches away. You wish you had rosemary right now, or at least a second blanket, because the air has turned cold. Not chilly, not breezy, cold like water left out overnight, cold like a breath that isn't yours touching the back of your neck. You dare a glance behind you. Nothing. No one. Just your bedmate, curled on their side, their hand twitching slightly in a dream. Their breath comes in short gasps now. You wonder what they're seeing. Maybe the same thing you are. Because in this space between midnight and dawn, between the first sleep and the second, the veil is thin. That's what they say. That's when the other things come out. You've heard the stories. The black dog that sits at the edge of the bed. The hag who rides your chest, whispering sins into your ears. The lover who appears in dreams and never leaves. Some say it's just imagination, that the fear comes from being too tired, too cold, too hungry, that it's just the straw poking your skin, or the sound of a rat in the wall. But when it's happening to you, you stop looking for explanations. You just want it to end. There's a heaviness now, like the blanket has doubled in weight, like someone is pressing down from above, not with hands, but with thought. You can't move. Not really. Just blink. Just breathe. It's not sleep paralysis. It's older than that. It's the feeling that you're not alone anymore. And you're not. Not entirely. Because this is the hour when the line between here and not here disappears. When your mind is loose and soft and vulnerable. When your body is still warm from dreaming, but your thoughts have gone cold. And whatever is standing in the corner of the room knows it. You wait. Not for courage, just for it to be over. Eventually, it is. The room shifts. The pressure lifts. You feel the blanket become light again. Your fingers twitch. Your breath returns. The shadow is gone. Your heart is still pounding, but you don't sit up. Don't speak. Don't wake the others. They wouldn't believe you. Or worse, they'd say they saw it too. So you close your eyes. Whisper a quiet prayer into the straw and hope that second sleep comes quickly. Because if you stay awake too long, it might come back. It's the middle of the night again. The dream has faded, and the fear with it. But now there's a different discomfort pulling you from sleep. Pressure. Low. Urgent. Familiar. It's not a demon this time. It's your bladder. And now you face the Elizabethan night's most dreaded dilemma. To pee or not to pee. You lie perfectly still, negotiating with yourself. Maybe you can hold it. Maybe it'll pass. Maybe you'll fall back asleep. But deep down, you know better. Because there are 3 people in the bed, the blanket is tucked in like a pastry. And somewhere nearby, is a chamber pot. The problem is getting to it. You slowly lift your head. Your bedmate's arm is draped over your shoulder, one leg pressed lightly against yours. There is no polite way to move, not without waking someone, not without starting a sleepy domino effect of grumbling, shifting, and groaning. Still, there's no choice. You've waited too long. You begin the maneuver. Slow, deliberate, like a fox escaping a trap made of snoring peasants and sour wool. One leg out, then the other. Your heel brushes someone's foot. They mumble. You freeze. Hold your breath, wait. Silence. You continue. The floor is cold, stone under straw. You move barefoot, eyes scanning for that essential object. The humble chamber pot? It's there somewhere hidden in the gloom. Probably under the bed, possibly in the corner, maybe beside the hearth, where it might still be warm, too warm. The truth is, in Elizabethan households, the night pot was as common as the bed itself. There was no trotting off to an indoor toilet, and certainly no bathroom with soft lighting and lavender mist. No, relieving yourself at night was a shared ritual, one everyone pretended wasn't happening, even though everyone knew. And worse, heard. Historians still argue about the etiquette of chamber pots. Were they emptied nightly? Did people knock before using one? Was there a system? Or did everyone just sort of go when it was their turn? From what we know, discretion was the only rule. That and aim. You finally spot it. A rounded clay vessel, chipped at the rim, sitting beneath a stool. You lift it carefully. Not too loud, not too fast. It's half full already. Of what you don't want to know? You just need it not to splash. You squat, praying to no one in particular that this moment stays uneventful. That no one rolls over and opens their eyes. That the pot doesn't tip. That the contents don't announce themselves. Because once the chamber pot makes a sound, everyone remembers where they are. A fringe tidbit? In some wealthier homes, pots were made of pewter or even porcelain, decorated. Pretty. Whimsical even. But in country inns and common homes, they were rough clay and terribly prone to cracks. A weak pot could betray you. Midstream. A humiliation no one ever truly recovered from. You finish. Carefully set it back. Cover it with the little square of cloth someone thoughtfully left nearby, part modesty, part mercy. You don't flush. You don't wash your hands. This is not a world of plumbing and scented soap. You just return to bed, feet cold, dignity bruised, hoping to reclaim a sliver of warmth before second sleep escapes. But then, someone else sits up. They saw you? It's the smaller figure beside the hearth. You catch their eyes in the firelight. Just for a second. Then they nod, silently, and rise to take their turn. This is how it goes. One after the other. The shared choreography of shame. No one speaks, because once the pot is in use, everyone pretends they're asleep. And in the morning, when it's emptied, by servant, sibling, or unlucky youngest, you all pretend it never existed. You slide back under the blanket, carefully rearranging yourself. The straw tick welcomes you like an old, lumpy friend. The warmth has mostly left your space, but your body fills it again. Slowly, you lie there, eyes open, listening to the soft pour of someone else's relief into the pot. You never thought you'd learn someone's voice by how they pee. But here we are. The pot is returned, the cloth replaced. The figure lies down again. Nothing is said, but in a strange, shared way. You feel a little closer to them now, because night isn't just about sleep. It's about survival, of heat, of space, of dignity. You think about how strange it is, how deeply human to accept this, to share not just dreams, but smells, sounds, secrets. No one is above it. Not nobles, not servants, not the goose. You adjust the blanket one last time, roll onto your side, and let your breath slow, because sleep is coming again. And with it, a kind of peace. Not because things are clean, not because they're silent, but because somehow, despite it all, you're still warm and still alive. The bed feels different tonight. Not colder, not more crowded, just heavier. You're still in it. Your usual side, your usual pillow, your usual nest of twisted blanket and stubborn straw. But something's changed. The others around you sleep as always, shifting, sighing, murmuring in half dreams. But at the very center of the bed, completely still, lies a figure who does not move. You know why? They're dead. And tonight, you're sharing your bed with a corpse. It's not a surprise. Not really. In the 16th century, death isn't separate from life. It isn't wrapped in plastic or hidden behind hospital curtains. It happens here, in the home, in the same room where babies are born, and bread is broken, and wool is spun. And when someone dies, they don't get whisked away. They stay, in the bed, until morning, sometimes longer. You lie very still now, listening, feeling the shape of the room around you. There's no terror in it, not quite. Just an alertness, a hyper-awareness of the space beside you, the lack of breath, the absence of movement, the presence of something else. They died last night. Quietly, no gasping, no drama, just a slowing of breath and then stillness. One moment here, the next, gone, and yet still here, because that's how it works. The dead don't leave right away. They wait until the family is ready, until the priest arrives, until the coffin's built or borrowed or dug up and dusted off from last time, until the mourners gather and the bell rings and the soil is broken. Until then, they rest with you. Historians still argue whether this practice of sleeping beside the dead was a matter of practicality or something deeper. Were they honoring the departed, or simply avoiding the cost of laying out the body elsewhere? Was it reverence or routine? Either way, it was normal, expected, and strangely tender. You shift slightly, careful not to disturb the blankets. They've been arranged, tucked tight around the body. Hands folded, eyes closed. Someone placed rosemary near the pillow, a traditional herb for remembrance, and to mask the early sweetness of decay. A fringe detail? It was common to place coins over the eyes, to keep them closed, but also, some believed, to pay the dead's passage into the next world. Other families used sewn linen caps, tightly tied beneath the chin. You're not sure which was used here. You haven't looked. You don't need to, because you know who it is. And that's the hardest part. It isn't a stranger. It's someone you knew, slept beside 100 times, someone who whispered gossip into your ear or stole the blanket or laughed in their sleep. Someone who, just 2 nights ago, had turned toward you and asked whether you thought spring would come early. They don't ask anymore, but their body lies where it always did. And so you adapt, like people always have. You breathe slower, shallower, out of respect, or out of caution. You're not sure which. It isn't fear. Not really. But there's something about being next to someone who no longer needs warmth that makes you hyper-aware of your own body. The rise and fall of your chest, the pulse in your wrist, the moisture in your eyes. Life is loud when death lies beside it, and it's quiet in a new way. The usual nighttime symphony of snoring and rustling is softer tonight. Maybe the others feel it too. The presence, the finality. Maybe they're just pretending to sleep, or maybe they're truly at peace, unbothered by the company of the departed. It wasn't always solemn. Sometimes it was inconvenient. "We've no space," someone might whisper. "The children need the floor. Just let him lie in the bed one more night." Or humorous. "He's warmer now than he was when he was alive." A woman once joked about her husband, 3 days in the bed, and still no coffin to be found. Death was familiar. Part of the furniture, and the bed, was the final resting place, long before the grave. You lie still. Eyes open, then closed, then open again. Your thoughts drifting between sleep and memory. You think of their laugh, the way they once tried to patch the bed tick with old lace, insisting even straw should feel fancy. The time they snuck a kitten into the bed under their cloak, whispering, "Don't tell father." the way their fingers twitched in dreams, as if chasing something they couldn't quite catch. The bed is quieter now. You feel the space where they used to toss. The absence of that one creaky spring in the rope that only squeaked when they turned. It doesn't squeak tonight. It never will again. You breathe in, then out. The scent of rosemary and beeswax. You know someone will come in the morning. They'll open the shutters. They'll say the usual things. And the body will be carried out, washed, dressed, veiled. Laid in a box if one can be found, or wrapped in linen if coin is short, buried with the others behind the chapel, where the wind always smells like earth and baking bread. But for now, for tonight, they're still here, and you're still beside them, because this is how it was done. Because beds were not just for the living, they were the last place anyone could feel warm. Sleep doesn't come easily after death visits your bed. The body is gone now, taken away at first light with whispered prayers and lowered eyes. The scent of rosemary still lingers faintly in the blankets, and the mattress is cool in the spot where they once lay. The tick feels heavier tonight, not physically, but emotionally, like it remembers. You lie back down, staring at the ceiling, unsure whether you're tired or simply empty. But as you finally begin to drift, a new sound stirs in the bed, one that's somehow more unsettling than silence. Breathing, but not normal breathing. Fast, shallow, uneven. Then the tiniest whimper. Your bedmate bolts upright, gasping. You jerk awake. They don't scream exactly, but their body jolts like it's been struck. Eyes wide, face damp, lips moving without sound. And then, a sharp inhale, a sob, hands trembling. It takes you a moment to understand. They're having a nightmare, or something worse, because in Elizabethan England, sleep disorders weren't just misunderstood. They were feared. Sleep was sacred, precious, a time of healing. But when it turned on you, when your rest became restless, it meant something. It meant sickness, or sin, or something unnatural. People with persistent nightmares were considered marked, either by guilt, madness, or something darker. And there weren't many treatments. If you couldn't sleep, it was your fault, or God's judgment, or a devil dancing on your chest. Your bedmate begins to mutter. Low, hoarse trembling. You recognize a prayer in their mouth, but it's fractured, falling to pieces as it spills out. They're sweating, pale, eyes flicking around the room like they're trying to find the place where the dream left its teeth. You reach out, place a hand gently on their shoulder. They flinch, then slowly, they exhale. The dream is loosening its grip, and you, for some reason, are the anchor pulling them back. Sleep disorders weren't diagnosed with names like parasomnia or REM disturbance. They were called things like devil's weight, or the night spasm, or the spirit thrall. If you thrashed, screamed, or walked in your sleep, that wasn't restlessness. That was a visitation. Historians still argue whether Elizabethans truly believed their sleep was haunted, or if it was just the only explanation they had. Medicine was primitive, psychology non-existent, but fear, that was plentiful. And fear always fills in the blanks. You help your bedmate lie back down, gently pulling the blanket over them. They don't speak. You don't ask. That's the rule. If a nightmare is spoken aloud, it becomes real. Still, you watch them as they settle. Their fingers twitch. Their brow furrows. You hope it's not starting again. And now you wonder, what did they see? In their dream, were they chased? Were they falling? Were they speaking to someone they'd buried? Did they see the woman who died in this very bed just yesterday? A fringe tidbit. In some households, it was common to pin a charm to the bed's underside to ward off bad dreams. bits of ash wood, braided cord, a page of scripture. In wealthier homes, it might be a saint's relic. In poorer ones, just a dried flower. Anything to hold back the shadows. You wish you had something like that now, because even though your bedmate is resting again, their breath still stutters, as if the dream has gone under, but not gone away. You lie back, eyes wide in the dark. Your own thoughts start to twist. What if you wake like that? What if you scream? What if you start walking in your sleep and don't remember where you went? There's a case from a London parish in 1599. A woman found in the churchyard just before dawn, barefoot and weeping, her night shift soaked in dew. She claimed she'd followed her husband's voice. He'd been dead 2 years. She was never quite the same after. You shift, trying to find comfort, but the bed feels strange again, like it's not holding you the same way, like it's learned something about you it won't forget. That's what dreams do after all. They see the parts of us we try to keep buried, and sometimes they don't wait for permission. They crawl into bed with us, wrap themselves around our legs, press into our chest, and stay. Not just for one night, sometimes forever. You breathe deeply. Try to let your thoughts go. Try to believe the morning will come quietly, like it always does. But deep inside, you know this truth. Sleep in this world is not a gift. It's a bargain. And the bed remembers every deal you've ever made. You're not sure what woke you, only that something feels different. Not the weight of the bed, not the people around you, not even the air. It's something inside, something slow and low, like a hum in your bones, a tension you didn't fall asleep with. You lie there perfectly still, eyes closed, listening. Then it hits you. Someone's touching you. Not by accident, not the casual brush of feet or the shoulder nudge of a restless sleeper. No, this touch is deliberate. A palm on your side, fingertips barely moving. Soft, exploring, waiting. You freeze. Welcome to the secret layer of Elizabethan bed sharing, where not every touch is innocent, and not every bedmate keeps to their side. You've heard the stories. Everyone has. And you've always assumed they were half-truths at best. Tavern exaggerations, giggled gossip by candlelight. But now, lying here, breath caught in your throat, you realize they were real. This is real. You exhale slowly, and the hand retreats, just slightly. Not apologetic, not ashamed, just cautious now, because that's the line everyone walks. Elizabethan beds were places of necessity, but they were also places of possibility. Not always welcome, not always asked for, and rarely spoken of in daylight. Historians still argue over how often intimacy bloomed or burned between bedmates. Diaries offer hints, letters drop clues, court records sometimes scream the truth, but most nights left no evidence, just the memory of a glance, a shift under the covers, a heartbeat too loud in the dark. You stay still, not because you're afraid, but because you don't yet know what you want. That's the cruel magic of this moment. Not knowing if this is comfort or transgression, not knowing if you'll regret this or if you already do. And behind it all, the rules, the real ones. If you speak, it becomes real. If you don't, it never happened. You remember hearing about a woman, young, unmarried, who shared a bed at an inn with a man she barely knew. She later said nothing had happened, but someone saw them leaving together at dawn. That was all it took. She lost her place. He didn't. Because in this world, sleeping beside someone can ruin you, even when you never touched. But sometimes, touching is the least dangerous part. You shift slightly now, and the hand disappears. Gone. Like it was never there. Your body still hums with its presence, the echo of skin on skin lingering like the warmth of the sun after it sets. And still, no one speaks. Around you, others sleep or pretend to. No one moves. But you know you're not the only one who felt it. That's the thing about these beds. They hold so much more than bodies. They hold temptation, resentment, affection unspoken for years, jealousy that smells like breath and sweat and linen. Whole histories unfold in the silent inches between shoulders. Lovers sleep back to back. Enemies face the wall. Secret admirers reach, then pull back. The brave confess. The clever pretend to dream. You think of that noblewoman from Kent, the one whose maid became her closest companion. They shared a bed for over a decade, traveled together, slept wrapped in the same woolen blankets through winter storms and summer heat. They never married. They never spoke a word of it. But their letters, decades later, are full of longing. I missed your hand beneath my arm. One line reads, I woke cold without you. No one questioned it, not aloud, but everyone knew. A fringe tidbit? One court case from 1611 detailed a scandal in which a man's wife discovered he had been laying too warmly with his apprentice. The phrase was enough. The judgment swift. The apprentice vanished soon after, sent north. The man remained married, though never again allowed to sleep outside his own chamber. So, what about you? What does your silence mean? Do you want to turn toward the hand? Or let it fade back into the story of the bed, forgotten by morning, rewritten in dreams? You close your eyes again. The tension has shifted. The air thick, heavy with everything unsaid. And then gently, you hear the faint rustle of someone turning over, facing away. It's over. Maybe, but you know now how quickly something can happen in the space of a breath, how easily affection can reach you through 2 inches of wool, how fragile the rules become when the lights go out, and how even a moment, a single hand's pause on your waist, can turn a shared bed into a secret history. No one will mention it in the morning. They never do. But tonight, you learn something important. Not every bed is meant for sleep, and not every silence is empty. Some are full of questions, and some are full of answers no one dares to say aloud. Morning, when it finally arrives, doesn't knock gently. It spills in through the shutters in pale, unfriendly light. It stirs the ash in the hearth. It pokes you in the eyes, exposes the twisted sheets, the half-dressed limbs, the wilted blanket barely hanging on for dignity. The silence that had settled over the bed in the dark is gone now, burned off by sunlight and reality. And with it comes the other thing, the cold one, the hard one, the one no one ever expects, consequences. Because in Elizabethan England, sharing a bed doesn't just stay in the night. It can follow you straight into the law books, and it has. You stretch slowly, trying not to look guilty. Of anything, of everything. Not because you did something wrong, but because in this world, perception is everything. If someone says you touched, if someone says you whispered something, if someone saw, that's enough. Even if all you did was sleep. You sit up, cross your arms, look down at the rumpled blanket, and hope the wrinkles don't tell the wrong story. Your bedmates are stirring. One coughs, another blinks, looks away. The one who turned toward you in the dark, already gone, left without a word. And just like that, you're left alone with the bed, and with the possibility of being named. You think back to that case in York, 1592. A man accused of unlawful familiarity with a neighbor's daughter after they shared a bed in a tavern. He claimed innocence, said nothing happened. She said the same. But one person had seen them, together, under the blanket. at dawn. That was all the court needed. He paid a fine. She lost her reputation. The tavern owner, though, he made a profit. Because if you think beds weren't part of legal matters, think again. Beds were evidence. Where you slept, who you slept with, whether the sheets had been changed, whether there were witnesses. Everything mattered. In marriage contracts, in inheritance disputes, in criminal trials. People were called to testify about where someone slept on a certain night, who they were near, whether the candle was still burning when they closed the curtain. And heaven help you if the court had to check the mattress for signs. A fringe tidbit? There was a case in 1605 where a woman's claim to an inheritance rested on whether she had been in the marital bed on her wedding night. The servants were brought in to confirm. They argued about the order of the sheets. One insisted she saw the bride emerge in the morning with flushed cheeks and tangled hair. That was enough. She got the land. Beds don't forget, and neither do people. You pull on your shift, fold the blanket roughly. Look around for your shoes. One is beneath the bed. The other is missing. You know it'll turn up in someone else's room, or maybe on the stairs. That's always how it is in houses like this, where beds overflow and lines blur, and no one really knows who belongs where. But the law? Oh, it pretends to know. Pretends to draw neat little lines around beds and bodies and names. But you've seen how easy it is to fall across those lines in the dark. There's that other case you remember, 1598. A woman brought to court for encouraging the overlong companionship of a widowed gentleman in a guest bed. That was the phrasing. Encouraging overlong companionship. Not touching, not kissing, just sharing space too warmly. And who decided it was too warm? A cousin. From across the hall. Through a door that was only mostly closed. You tie your laces, smooth your hair. Try to remember if anyone saw you last night. Try to remember if anything happened that can't be undone. Try to forget the way you leaned slightly toward someone else's breath when you thought no one was looking. But the bed saw. And someone always talks. That's the danger of these shared spaces. They don't end at dawn. They ripple. They leave traces. A missing button. A scent on your skin. A hesitation at breakfast. A flush when someone asks what time you got to bed. And the law is waiting for it. Because in this era, morality is enforceable. Your purity? Legal property? Your choices? Everyone's business. And a single accusation is enough to pull your future apart, like poorly stitched linen. You stand now. Stretch your back. Try not to think too hard about the way you shifted in the night. Whether you reached out, whether they did, whether it even happened at all, or if your body just remembered wanting something and moved without asking. You look at the bed one last time, still dented, still warm, still holding secrets you didn't mean to share. Beds are supposed to be places of rest, but in this world, they're witnesses, and sometimes they testify. The house is quiet now, not in the way it was during the night, thick and breathless, filled with murmurs and creaks and the occasional shifting limb. No, this is the morning quiet, the kind that hums beneath the clink of a ladle in the kitchen, the distant call of someone gathering wood, the whisper of someone brushing their hair too slowly, lost in thought. And in the bed, you're still there, one last time, because this isn't just another night behind you. This is the last night, the final time you'll lie in this straw-filled tick, the final time your shoulder brushes the wall, the final time your foot grazes someone else's in the dark, and neither of you says a word. It's the final morning in this bed, and that realization settles over you like the blanket you're about to fold for the last time. The others are still asleep, or pretending. You've all grown good at that. pretending not to feel the warmth, the tension, the memory of something unspoken. The bed is familiar now, a creased, tangled record of your breath, your fears, your longings. And yet, even as you lie in it, you know, it's time to go, because life is moving on. And beds, like people, never stay the same for long. You sit up, slowly. Your bones ache in that old practiced way. The tick sighs beneath you. You press your palm to it, feeling the impression your body made. The hollow where your hip always falls. The frayed patch where your knee catches when you turn. The part you shared, once, with someone who no longer speaks your name. You let your hand rest there, just for a moment. Historians still argue whether people back then ever missed their beds the way we do now. Whether they formed attachments to these lumpy, scratchy, too full sleeping arrangements. But read enough letters, listen closely enough to the language, and you'll see it. They did. They missed the warmth. They missed the weight. They missed the closeness. Because in this world, no one slept alone. Not really. Not even when they wanted to. The bed was the great equalizer. You shared it with family, strangers, lovers, enemies. You shared it in sickness, in secrets, in silence. It was a space not just for rest, but for living, for breaking, for remembering, and for leaving. There's an old saying, passed through centuries like a lullaby whispered between generations. You don't know a person until you've shared a bed in winter. You understand that now. You've seen who shivers, who kicks, who curls into you without asking, who turns away when you reach for them, who breathes steadily, who cries into their pillow, who dreams loudly, who wakes without remembering your name, and who stays close, even after the fire's gone cold. You rise now. Roll the blanket at your feet, fold it once, twice, and lay it at the edge of the bed. The others don't stir, but you know they're awake. You know they feel it too. That weight in the air, that soft goodbye. The tick is bare now. Its straw exposed in spots. It looks tired, just like you. You wonder who will sleep in it next. A cousin? A traveler? A widow passing through town on her way to a place she won't stay? You won't know. You'll be gone by then, but the bed will remain, and it will remember you. A fringe tidbit? In some small villages, when someone died or moved on, their spot in the bed wasn't taken immediately. It was considered rude, disrespectful. You waited a day, sometimes 3. The space stayed open, a ghost of the person who once curled there, who once whispered into the linen. It wasn't about mourning. It was about marking that someone had mattered. Even here, even now, you run your hand across the tick once more. The straw rustles. The scent of old wool and ash clings to your skin. And then you step away. Not quickly, but with purpose. Because you know, you're not taking the bed with you, but it's taking you with it. Every dream, every ache, every mistake you made in the dark, every comfort you offered in silence, every confession you held just behind your teeth. The bed knows, and it doesn't judge. It just waits for the next body to lie down and forget what time it is. You walk to the door, look back once, then step into the morning, into the world beyond the walls, into a future that doesn't come with a blanket and doesn't always offer warmth. The bed is behind you now. The house is quiet. Your steps are soft. Outside, the sky is the color of cold milk, and the air tastes faintly of ash and dew. You move slowly, like you're still half asleep, like the bed is calling you back, not with words, but with warmth, with the memory of shared silence, of limbs tangled in darkness, of breath that wasn't yours brushing your skin in the night. You breathe in deeply. Hold it. Let it go. Because this is the part we rarely talk about. Not the nights themselves, but the leaving of them, the quiet parting, the way we slip away from spaces that held us, barely acknowledging the comfort they gave. You'll forget the smell of the straw, the exact shape of the blanket, the name of the person who coughed twice and turned their face toward yours but never spoke. But the feeling? That will stay. Not in your memory exactly, but in your body, in the way you sigh when you lie down again somewhere new, in the way you reach for someone without thinking, in the way you sleep. So close your eyes now. Let your shoulders fall. Let the night take you again, this time alone. You don't have to share the bed anymore, but in the silence between dreams, you might still feel someone there, just for a moment, and then only peace.